to start out the new year right.
You bet.
Let's address a few issues that we've seen recently. We're going to continue with the education quality in Corpus Christi, both at the secondary education level and at the community college level.
Right.
It's my understanding, based on statistics that we've researched on the internet, that CCISD is in the bottom 25% of Texas high schools,
Right.
Texas ISDs. Now, that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. I imagine that we're not the only ones that just paid our property taxes about a week ago.
No, sure.
So we all just shelled out
Big
$5,000-10,000
Right.
for the property taxes that support the high school and of course the community college.
Mhm.
Now we're in the bottom 25%. We just went out and filmed, and I'll put a clip of that in there. I got a little bit of the new high school, this gorgeous school that's being built right down the street.
Yeah.
$100 million property.
Okay.
Gorgeous high school. So we're not, Corpus Christi is not, they're not cutting the expenses short on the facilities. They may well not be paying the Houston level
Mhm.
for teachers, but they're paying decent amounts.
Sure.
But something's wrong.
Well, I've said this, several times. I think it's worth repeating. Is they had a board of trustees down here, for CCISD, and they had a leader on that for a while. And I can't blame it strictly on the leader, but certainly whoever is the president has a lot to say about things. But what they did is they didn't like the fact that they had 3-year contracts for the teachers. So what they wanted to do was make sure that they had the wherewithal to get rid of a teacher if they turned out to be bad. So they cut everybody's throat and cut that down to 1 year. So it's a renewing 1-year contract. And if you're a serious teacher and you're looking for a job, folks, I mean, you're not going to settle for a 1-year contract in the long run. You want at least a security of 3, and then have decent evaluations and so forth. And then the newspaper lately, the Caller Times, has been running articles about the reason that the CCISDs won't get rid of bad teachers is they're afraid of lawsuits and so forth and so on. So they don't.
I guess I should have muted my phone.
Okay, well, that's fine. And we're getting calls again. But, so, the problem with that is, you're weakening the system terribly. And then I'll just lead that one into something like the Coastal Bend College, where they have no tenure system. And at Del Mar, one of the main reasons I took the job here, as I eased out of the industrial research business, was that they did have a tenure system. And you spend your time, and then you're in your first promotion. I came in as an assistant professor, and as soon as I had the time in, I think it was 5 years for an associate. Then if you were, if everything went well and your evaluations were good for promotion, then you had that designation for tenure. And, that meant a lot to me, because that means that I do have some stability. And just because somebody doesn't like me or they run out of money, then, I don't have to worry about losing my position. But, you just don't know what's going to happen with that. And I have a strong suspicion that with the new board here, a couple of new board members, Board of Regents members at Del Mar College, that they may be trying to get rid of tenure for us.
I think that can be devastating. I am not a teacher, I've never been one, but I have several family members that are. They teach in high school. My daughter teaches in a suburb of Houston, and that's okay to have no tenure in Houston, in the Houston area, because you have the ability to leave one ISD and go to another.
Right.
Now in Corpus, you're not going to have that ability, and certainly not at the community college level. So if you're at risk of not having a continued employment, you're going to be less likely to want to stay.
Mhm.
So that's going to attract people that are not at the caliber that you've already been, or that you've been attracted to Del Mar.
Right.
Like some of the professors that I met over there.
Mhm.
Those people would be less inclined to come to school knowing that they didn't have that stability
Right.
in a small community where if you don't have that job, you've got to pick up and move.
Right.
That's going to impact the level of education, I believe, that the children
Right.
of Corpus Christi are going to get.
Mhm. No, it
And
does.
also, it's already impacted, apparently, the CCISD.
Mhm. Yeah.
We're paying all that money, buying these nice buildings, building these nice buildings, and we're in the bottom 25%.
Well,
And then they flow in, those kids graduate or get, or drop out and get their GEDs through Del Mar, which raises the cost of doing business out of Del Mar. And then they flow into the economic system of Corpus Christi, and we've got the second most illiterate city in America.
Right.
And
There's a reason for that, you know, I mean, it's hard to just pinpoint exactly what's going on, ladies and gentlemen, but, you know, if you add all of the weaknesses together, you've got a real weak system. You know, I mean, if you're strong here and you're a little weak here, then what you need to do is concentrate on the weak areas and bring it back up to the rest of the standards. And when I got to Del Mar, it scares me, it's 25 years ago, then it had one of the best reputations in the country as being a very fine community college. And that with the fact that I was sitting here on the Gulf Coast, which I love, and I'm not working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 2 or 3 years straight in a research lab, and I can see my kids in the daylight more than once a month, then it meant a lot to me to have that tenure possibility. But if they remove that, now I don't think I think Del Mar, if that's their goal, they're going to have to start with hiring people on a non-tenure track basis, and that's what they're going to start to do.
And that means they're going to attract lower quality employees.
That's right.
Now, again, all these things flow in, the educational system flows in, and then that's the employees in the general employment of Corpus Christi, which, by the way, the average household income in Corpus is lower than the average in America.
Right.
So we're right in the middle of the oil patch where wages are high,
Mhm.
yet we have a lower than average family income. So a whole lot of things are going wrong here. Not many things are going right.
Right.
Now, we do graduate some excellent kids,
Oh, yes.
but I'm afraid it's a very low minority of them.
Yeah.
Um,
It's you know, it's not the majority by any stretch of the imagination. And if they're just passed through in high school, let's say, and they can't read, write, you know, add, subtract, multiply, divide by the time they get through, and it's left up to the community college to do what CCISD should be doing, then that's double dipping the taxpayers right there. And
Yeah.
it's not doing the students any good. When they come out and hit that brick wall called college, that's the real rude awakening. And then they feel really inferior, and a lot of them would just fold and go home. You know, they say, I don't want to pursue this. This is not what I thought it was going to be. So I believe the CCISD program should be a lot more rigorous than they are, and not just in one select school or two, but all of them across the board. And you know, if you've got excellent teachers at one high school, I think that the district should go ahead and say, okay, this next year we're going to relocate some of these people to some of their lower performing high schools, and see if you can you know get the wealth spread around. But in addition to that, you've got to hire the best folks, and you can't do that, expect somebody to come in here for a 9-month contract and be happy with that. It's just not going to work.
No, in Corpus, you have to be going there to get there. We're not someplace you can pass through.
Right.
So if they're going to pack up and move here for a lower wage than what they get in Houston,
Mhm.
There's got to be some incentive. Now, the Gulf Coast is a nice incentive,
Right.
but does it compensate for the deficiency in the salary?
Right,
I don't, and in the tenure.
right.
I don't think so.
Well, and then, you know, with this administrative bloat, is the way the Wall Street Journal put it, and I've seen this happen at Delmar, and I've seen it happen at Coastal Bend, and it's happened at Texas A&M, Corpus Christi, and Kingsville, and other places. But what's happened is these professional administrators are being hired to run the college more like a business than it is a institution of higher learning. And it's just not working, because when you take all that money out of the system that you could be hiring more professors and so forth, and support people, and you put it into the administration, and then you give them raises every year, which are out of sight, which doesn't correspond to the rest of the raises for the other employees, and then give them bonuses all the time, then you know, that waters down not only the financial end of it, but also the academics. It just doesn't work.
You know, that reminds me of a company in Houston that was thriving several years ago, that made the news, I guess it's been about 10 years ago. They made the news in a very negative manner. They used to pay high salaries to the administrators and massive bonuses, and the bonuses they paid were many times for ideas in anticipation of reality, not proven ideas. That would be Enron. And they were a huge company
Oh, yeah.
in Houston, a big facade, quite honestly. After they went back and looked at, reconstructed their financials, they may not have ever been making any money.
No.
But it was a big facade.
Right.
And that was a bunch of guys that were telling each other how good they were and producing bad financial statements.
Right.
That, by the way, were audited.
Right. Well, that reminds me of Delmar College.
You know, we see some correlations there. Enron, their books probably balanced, but they had the off-balance sheet item. Delmar, we found, based on Mr. Johnson's memo, that books weren't quite in balance for a while.
No.
Had a bad conversion, lost some things,
Yeah.
wrote off some receivables, like Kingsville, Texas A&M Kingsville, Coastal, Verizon, Navy,
Yeah.
uh,
And the
Council of Government.
Council of Governments. Yeah.
So,
And the beat goes on.
so when you see a problem in the finance area, as Enron had, that's an indicator you've got problems in other areas.
Right.
And I like to look at financial ratios, and I've been comparing Delmar's ratios financially with the other community colleges in Texas, and again, on a bell curve, they're always 2 standard deviations removed from the median.
Right.
In almost all categories.
Right. In the wrong direction.
In absolutely the wrong direction. So, something appears wrong at Delmar. And what is it? We don't know. We're having a lot of trouble getting information. We can see once we navigate through all the roadblocks and barriers, we find where there are problems. But then they lead us to more and more problems that we have to research, because they're not willingly providing the information that we need.
No.
The $26.7 million estimate was a clear indication that they don't want us looking.
No. What was that old foghorn, leghorn? Go away, boy, you bother me.
Yeah.
That's. I think that was quoted in one of the news media expose of that. And you know, I'm still flabbergasted that the system over there is, if you have an email from one person to the next, and they're let's say, I won't use the term conspiring, they're thinking high, you know, very very hard about taking and covering that stuff up, and let's scare Mr. Bennett away, you know, shooting this $26.7 million estimate for fulfilling his request, and that'll drive him away, that'll frighten him. And the people that concocted that, and I can't see any other reason except to try to scare you away.
It was pure intimidation.
Yeah, right. So any emails and correspondence between the employees of Del Mar College when they concocted that erroneous number. Well, I don't think it was erroneous, that false number, okay, trying to scare him off, then the Attorney General says that if there's any emails person to person, that was attorney-client privilege, and we probably can't get a hold of those. So, you know,
And
so,
that's in spite of the fact that we're the ones paying the bill.
yeah, I'm paying the bills. So are you out there, ladies and gentlemen. You're taxpayers. I mean, you're the client. I mean, you're paying these accountants that can't keep the books straight over there. You're paying for the attorneys that are trying to protect the administration over there from such nonsense and so forth, and trying to withhold that information. So, I don't know what to tell you.
And that kind of leads into an integrity thing,
Mhm.
I think. If they're not trying to hide anything, if there's nothing to hide, they shouldn't be trying to hide it.
Okay.
And we don't know if there's an integrity issue or not, but why are they trying to keep us, prevent us from getting information?
Yeah.
Well, they probably didn't want us to know that the books were out of balance.
Right.
I suspect that was fairly embarrassing to have to admit that,
Mhm.
particularly after they have an outside CPA firm do an audit on those books.
Right.
And maybe it wasn't a material amount, I don't know. We don't know how much it was out of balance, quite honestly. We know that the plug entry that Mr. Johnson was referring to was $185,000.
Mhm.
And he did justify it with some accounts that he said were a component, those that were written off, but that Verizon account was both paid,
Right.
according to their records,
Mhm.
and supported by a standby letter of credit, which is a negotiable instrument.
Mhm.
So there's no way that could have been written off.
Right.
If it was written off, it was pure negligence
Mhm.
because it had a standby letter of credit.
Right.
You could take that down to the bank and cash it.
Mhm.
So why was that a component of that $185,000 entry? It makes no sense.
Well, another thing that stinks, and you know, I mean, if it looks like a duck and it waddles like a duck and it quacks like a duck, then it's probably a duck, folks. But why in the world did they write off $54,000 to Texas A&M University Kingsville? And then when we asked both Del Mar and Kingsville for the records and so forth with that, all of a sudden we can't get them.
Well, Kingsville clammed up, and KRIS went down there. Initially, they were pretty receptive, and then after that, something happened. We got word of a phone call,
Yeah, from Del Mar.
and all of a sudden, no more records.
Yeah, well, you know, I think the only thing that's gonna have to happen with that is maybe a state audit, because that's all state money.
It is. Now, that's one state agency, and it's shifting a burden from Kingsville to us,
Right.
because we had to fund that.
Mhm.
All the bills that Del Mar get paid, they either get paid by tuition, the receipts and tuitions, grants, or some kind of tax form.
Mhm.
That $185,000 that was written off, we had to cough that up.
Mhm. That's right.
So Kingsville got a benefit of $54,000. It cost Del Mar $54,000. The taxpayers subsidized Del Mar.
Right.
So it went from a state taxing situation to a local tax.
Right.
So it was still a governmental agency. It still got paid, but we paid the bill that we shouldn't have.
Mhm.
So.
Well, and then, you know, another little bit of flack that's been thrown at me is I've requested a few things from Coastal Bend College. And, you know, I want to know certain things up there. And they say, well, why, you're not a taxpayer to the Coastal Bend College district? And I said, no, I'm not, but they get a lot of state subsidized and federal. And yes, I am a taxpayer into those folks, big time. Okay? So this nonsense about, well, I don't own property up there in their college district and that I can't get this information, that's not going to fly. I am a taxpayer to the state, feds, and everything else under the sun. So I'm waiting to see what's going to happen up there. And that was another set of books. I think they just had
Oh, it was horrible.
yeah,
They-
a board of trustees meeting up there lately, a special called one to go over what was that, the annual audit?
They had a management letter for internal control weaknesses that went on and on.
Yeah,
It was, I'm impressed with the CPA firm that did the audit.
yeah,
I'd like to get them hired down here to do a little work.
yeah.
But they were doing a good job. And an auditor should be able to find weaknesses that need to be corrected. Now, and that, the books were out of balance at Delmar. I would say, even if that's not a material weakness, and it may not be, even if it's not a material weakness, that's a weakness.
Mhm.
There's something wrong. When you do a conversion from one accounting system to another, and they don't tie, they don't agree, 1,000 entries here, 900 entries here, we got a problem.
That's right.
Nobody really with an accounting background would continue with that problem and live with it. They would stop and say, hey, we have to do this over again.
Well, we have no internal auditor.
You know, you've got a sign that says internal auditor that way,
Mhm.
and that way there's a vacant office where an internal auditor probably should be.
Yep.
And for the last 2 years that I'm aware of, it may have gone on for much longer than that. But not only do you not have an internal auditor, which is an integral part of the internal control system, you don't have a CFO with an accounting course.
Right.
Not an accounting degree, not an accounting course.
Right.
And I haven't found where there's a CPA working there. I know Mr. Johnson doesn't show up when I do a search on the CPA site.
I don't think he is.
So you've got a weakness in staff with no offsetting or compensating internal control in the area of an internal auditor. So, well, gosh,
There you go.
that reminds me a lot of the smartest guys in the room,
Yeah.
Enron.
Mhm.
And when you have a weakness, somebody's going to expose it.
Right.
And I have been an auditor. I was with a large accounting firm, an international accounting firm, for several years. And it's my experience that when there is a lack of accountability, people get confused as to whose money it really is.
Oh, yeah.
And I've seen this over and over again. There seems to be a gray line between the company's money or the entity's money and mine.
Mhm.
They're not going to use that old tree. I'm going to pull it out. I'm going to put a bigger tree in there, and we're going to throw it away anyway. So I'll just take it to my ranch.
Right.
Yeah. That sort of thing happens all the time,
Oh, yeah.
and they justify that time and again. It's always justified in their mind,
Mhm.
right up until they put the handcuffs on them,
Mhm.
and probably after that even.
Right.
But I've seen it for years. I've seen that same thing happen.
Mhm.
And that's an integrity issue. You know, we spent some time at the academy there, and
Naval Academy.
and there's three service academies in America, and
Well,
that's one of them.
You got Coast Guard too.
I didn't know if most people knew about that.
Okay.
So there are really four.
Yeah, right. So,
I guess they don't have a football team, so people.
well,
don't.
that's what it is.
But integrity is a major component of that 4-year
Yeah.
program.
Oh, yeah.
If you breach any part of that integrity, there are serious consequences.
Mhm.
Now, that's just not true in the business world.
No.
And I do a lot of business in the Rio Grande Valley.
Mhm.
And it's my impression there's a huge gap in the integrity down there. And I get that impression because about every 3 years or so, one of the county sheriffs gets thrown into the federal penitentiary.
Mhm.
And so I'm thinking that's a strong indication.
Right.
And then we have judges down there that get arrested, and I believe the last one that got arrested actually committed suicide.
Mhm.
So I suspect he might have been guilty. But that was a big kickback thing with attorneys. And they had an attorney here that, actually he was from San Antonio, that was being prosecuted here.
Mhm.
There's a lot of integrity issues down there, which filter their way through the system and result in higher cost for the taxpayers. And it's, a lot of it's in construction, the ISDs down there, a lot of the school board trustees have been, they've been convicted.
Mhm.
They've been charged and convicted.
Yeah.
Because they do a lot of building, like this $100 million project over here. When you start getting that amount of money, or those large sums of money, and you don't have the internal control structures in place, somebody's gonna see a gray area there and say,
Mhm.
you know, I deserve that.
Right.
And they're gonna take it. And,
Well,
and they're really not gonna give a whole lot of thought to the implications to the taxpayers, because a few $1,000s on a $100 million contract,
mhm.
that's a rounding error.
Right.
So, I think it's easily justified, but I see a lot of easily justified to the criminal.
Mhm.
But I see a lot of corruption down in the Rio Grande Valley that is being addressed. Now, I haven't seen much corruption being exposed here. And I'm wondering, does that 145-mile difference in geography, does it change that much up here and there just isn't any corruption?
Oh, no, it's everywhere these days, it's incredible. When I first got to Del Mar, there was a person that was over in maintenance department, one of the higher ups in that organization, that would take welding crews and paint and stuff out to his ranch and get things done. That finally came to an end. And I think we had a CCISD superintendent here at one time that got caught with painting his house or some damn thing. I can't remember what it was.
But it does happen all the time, and the only way, you're not gonna prevent it,
Mhm.
but the only way to mitigate those sort of things
Right.
is to have the internal control structure in place.
Mhm.
And part of that structure at Del Mar would be the internal audit function.
Right.
And I think we're terribly exposed as a result of not having that internal auditor employee.
Mhm. Well, look at the write-offs.
The write-offs are horrible, 2.838 million over the last 7 years,
Yeah. Mhm.
approximately $400,000 a year.
Right.
They can't collect the tuition.
Well, and when we looked through all that stuff, when I had the initial Public Information Act request in, when we stumbled over a lot of that.
5-foot stack of paper.
Yeah, then, I asked for all the verifications that the CFO at the time, who's still there, told the Board of Regents members in a what was that, a workshop they called it.
He'd exhausted
He
all
collection
efforts.
and there wasn't one single return receipt.
No green card, so I'm wondering, exhausted all collection efforts.
Mhm. Well, doesn't that include JP Court?
I would include it. I would have included a certified letter. If it's under $1,500, I'm not sure what the cutoff is now,
Mhm.
but you got small claims court.
Right,
And if it's over that, they're hiring these attorneys anyway.
that's right.
Let's go ahead and hire some more.
Put them to work.
And they will do it on a contingency.
Mhm. Yeah, a higher collection agency.
Well, they do send it out to a collection agency, and every once in a while I'll see a $50,000 return from the collection agency, so they get a little bit of it. But I'm wondering, can't our secretaries make a phone call and do that? Because I know that's what the collection agency's doing.
Well, it's a whole lot cheaper to just hire one person that sends nothing but collection notices out.
Pay them $40,000 a year.
Yeah,
We're already spending $400,000 a year.
that's right.
I'm betting we can get some return on the dollar
Oh,
there.
yeah, that's right. Well, I was interested in this. I have not read it. Ed just gave me the book. And it says, Becoming a Leader the Annapolis Way. And Annapolis, that's Naval Academy, is what it's all about. And it's got some of the cadets on the front. And it says, this book will benefit those who hope to assume authority in any field of life. President Jimmy Carter. Now, I think Carter was an Annapolis graduate.
He's the only president that graduated from Annapolis.
Okay.
Now, he wasn't a very good president,
Well,
but he did have, and still does have, integrity.
right.
And he's a very bright man.
Yeah.
He just, not much of an economic.
Right, and then it says 12 combat lessons from the Navy's Leadership Laboratory. So I'm going to go ahead and read that one. Here it is, the battle-proven program for teaching anyone how to take initiative, triumph over adversity, and become a leader. Maybe I ought to buy a dozen or so of those for Del Mar College.
Quite honestly, Doctor, I gave those to all the board members and all the administrators at one of my clients
Mhm.
after their general manager died, and we went in, and he was also the only accountant there, and we went in and started reconstructing some things. I said, you know, these guys really need a little help here, so I gave them to all the board members
Okay.
and all the senior administrators.
Right.
It's a great book.
Mhm.
It's a good lesson, and you and I know some retired Army and Air Force people that the ones we know had wings on their shoulder.
Mhm.
They're full bird, and you know, the one thing that I've noticed about all those bird colonels, they all have integrity.
Oh, yeah.
You just don't get there on a line.
No. Well, that's one thing that has raised its ugly head, and I'll use that on my show more so than this one, but 2 years and 4 days ago, Del Mar College locked out a retired Army bird colonel who was a Special Forces Airborne Ranger. Okay?
I wouldn't have locked him out.
And then they didn't expect him to come back with a vengeance on and do that. And now that went through the court system, and it went through the 13th Court of Appeals here at the state level. And the 13th Court of Appeals agreed with the man when he said that he was unjustly locked out and forced into retirement and so forth and so on. So it's going to be a very interesting saga when that one's all over. But why in the world these administrators feel they can challenge somebody that's got that much background and integrity is just beyond me, because it shows me zero integrity at the administrative level of these different community colleges. And the same problem we've got up in Beeville at Coastal Bend College. So that's another story for another day.
It is, but think of the cost involved in prosecuting that, going to the Court of Appeals. Now it's been remanded back.
Yeah.
So they're gonna have to go through they're gonna have a real trial
Right.
or do a settlement.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking they're gonna be lucky with just 6 digits
Oh,
for a total cost of this thing. They're
it's
gonna
going to be
be
real high 6 digits.
they're gonna be just really lucky to hold it down to that level.
Right.
And now, I remember a hearing that you participated in a year and a half ago or so, and when you testified, you said, when I have a problem with someone, I call them in and we just talk it out.
Right.
It seems to me that, and I've been involved in way too many court cases. I usually get hired as an expert witness.
Mhm.
But in the end, and they're usually solved in mediation, that occasionally we go to court. But in the end, at mediation, the result is the two parties with mediator just get in a room and talk it out.
Mhm.
And then it's settled.
Right.
Now that's usually hundreds of thousands of dollars later.
Right.
So with,
Well, you can stave that off. I don't know if I've told you this story. I think I did. One of my best friends in undergraduate school went to medical school. He was a pre-med student, and he went to Johns Hopkins and went up there on a MD, PhD program, earned his MD degree, and he also concurrently earned a PhD in psychology. And then he went into the residency in psychiatry, and there he was. I mean, and you know, after we both got through with our graduate studies and stuff, we kept up with one another. And you know, I'd occasionally say, you know, I've got this problem. And he said, just haul the people into the room and sit down and discuss it, okay? So if you got a problem with the spouse, you got a problem with a family member, you got a problem with your employer, and so forth and so on, or some of your employees, then put them in a room and sit down and talk. And I've advised this president of Del Mar College to do the same thing. And he could have staved and alleviated literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees, if he just say, okay, I want all parties present in this boardroom. I want you to bring your bagged lunch, make sure you had a good breakfast, make sure you've got enough water in here, or beverage that you want to drink until dinner time, and we're going to come in here and I'm going to lock that door and nobody's leaving until we've got this problem solved. And 9 times out of 10, halfway through the morning, you can solve the problem. And why people just won't sit down and talk problems out, I don't know. And I mean, I've tried to do that. I'm unable to do that a couple of times lately, but
Honestly, that sounds like $1 million piece of advice for Delmar alone.
oh yeah.
Right. And I've been in too many lawsuits. They always end up settling the same way.
Right.
They sit down, they get the mediator.
It's only happened that I know of at Delmar here recently, one time. And what happened was, this man was told it was $26.7 million to have 105 million documents over a 120-year period submitted to him if he'll cough the $26.7 million up. So after a couple of real bad press days on television with KRIS over here, Channel 6, then somebody finally got enough sense to go in with the school attorney, the board attorney, and Mr. Bennett and Mr. Johnson, who's the controller, and sat down, and within 15 minutes, it was worked out.
It was solved, and
I mean,
it was solved. The result was we got, I believe, 179 pages
right.
of what we wanted.
Well, that's all you asked for anyway.
It's what we wanted.
You didn't ask for 105 million.
It took Augie Rivera to get it done
Yeah,
because nobody at the school was able to do it.
right,
They had to bring in Augie, who was running for judge at the time,
right.
to figure out this is the way to do it. And no matter how you feel about Augie, that day he did a wonderful job.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah.
on the other side of the fence, that day, the other people did a terrible job.
Right.
105 million documents. I'm not sure Delmar's ever produced 105 million documents in the time they existed.
No, probably not.
But when, I forget, it was 9 general ledger account,
Right,
detailed transactions. Johnson knew what I was talking about.
right. Well, it's a marvelous system. That's what my dad used to do if I had any problems with my brother and so forth. He'd just set us down in a room and talk it out. He'd say, okay, this is unacceptable, and so forth and so on. So if there's anybody out there that has had a problem and would like to sit down and talk to me about it, I'm wide open.
And they advertise that, I think the local judicial system has a free mediator downtown.
It's dispute resolution.
That's exactly right. They advertise it. Yeah.
And it works. It works.
It does work because if you don't use that one, you pay attorneys and end up in the
That's
same
right.
spot.
That's right.
A whole lot, you both spend a whole lot more money.
Right. Well, there are certain mediations that I've been involved with where I just said, no, I'm not buying this. And but that's a different story. That's not things that can be worked out. That's when the city sued me for $30,000 for putting
For being a citizen.
for being a citizen and trying to stop tearing down an acre's worth of shade down there on the bayfront.
Which they wanted to build back for 44 million, I believe.
Yeah, they want to put 44 million, put it back in there. And, so it can be something that won't work on the mediation and sitting down. But in 99% of the cases, ladies and gentlemen, if you just sit down and talk it out, if there's been some misunderstanding or whatever, then, try it out.
And I think that 26.7 million is a very good example because it did take less than 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And that was the prep time and everything.
Right. Because I had to go to class in 15 minutes.
And you weren't late.
Yeah, I had to leave the room in 15 minutes, and I think it was 14 minutes and 40 seconds later. after we started, I was able to go and get my class taken care of. So that's a classic example. So I hope that some of the administrators at Del Mar College and some of their board members over there will pay attention. And I told that President Mark Escamilla, I guess the first month he was there, I said, you've got some real problems. Why don't you just go and close the door and hash it out and see how many of them you can cure right up front. We don't need a whole bunch of high-priced attorneys over there dragging it out forever.
And attorneys have no incentive to stop the bill.
No, they have none whatsoever.
They all bill hourly.
That's right, by the minute.
It's sections of an hour. I think it's
Yeah.
every 10th of an hour, every 6 minutes they
Every
they
6
click.
minutes, yeah.
And attorneys are good. They're educated. They can solve problems. There's no incentive to solve a problem if the client has an endless supply of money.
That's right.
And I believe that client has an endless supply of money,
Mhm.
based on the attorney's invoices that we've read.
Yeah, well, that's my project this evening. I've got to go update my Public Information Act request for the amount of money that our attorneys have charged us over the last 3 or 4 months.
And we're continuing to look at the Del Mar books. Every time we get an answer to one of our requests, which takes quite a while, right? They're 10-day letters, but they always get sent off to the attorney, or generally they get sent to the attorney and then to the attorney general.
Mhm.
So sometimes it's months before we get a response,
Right.
Or get
Yeah,
access to our
actually,
documents.
Yeah.
We get a response saying it's sent to the attorney general.
Yeah.
So we're going to continue to look at the books. We know there's something wrong based on Mr. Johnson's memo.
Mhm.
Mr. Johnson's memo was a result of several PIA requests. It wasn't easy to get there. The books were out of balance. Well, that's a bad sign. That's a bad sign. The conversion didn't go well. That's a really bad sign. Now we're asking for additional information. We found the Navy with 42,000. It indicated it was written off as a bad debt, but we're asking for more documentation for that 42,000. Because my impression, it just said Navy. My impression is that's our Navy.
That's right.
I'm not sure that,
I don't think it's Old Navy clothing.
you know, and I don't think the Pakistani Navy's been going down here. We are both very familiar with the Navy, and
Mhm.
they're not out of money.
No.
So they should be paying their bill. So we've asked for more documentation on that. And there's a reason we ask for the specific postings, because they're easy ways to manipulate the books when you don't have the internal control structure in place. And Del Mar does not have the internal control structure in place because they don't have an internal auditor.
Right.
Now, there are other symptoms that they don't have the internal control structure in place, but the lack of that internal auditor removes any accountability.
Mhm.
So if we weren't asking, that memo would have never surfaced.
No,
Yeah.
and there's 3
No.
pages of write-offs would never.
Nobody ever said, hey, we can't collect from Kingsville.
Mhm.
Nobody ever said, or they publish a document that's their annual report, I forget what the name of it is, but it's an annual report. In that, you'll never find that we couldn't collect from Texas A&M Kingsville. You'll
Right.
never find that the books were out of balance. That just wasn't published.
Mhm.
Now, it's public information only because we keep investigating.
Right.
Um,
And, you know, I think the general public and Del Mar College certainly at this stage of the game, and Coastal Bend's finding out real quick, and some of the other entities that we've written Public Information Act requests to. And it reminds me of that movie that Joe Pesci was in, My Cousin Vinny, when the judge who played Herman Munster, what was his name? Anyway.
you serious? You were serious about that?
Yeah, and so the judge said that you're gonna do this, that, and the other, and Pesci said something else, and he said, the judge said, bailiff, would you come take him, you know, to the slammer here? And Pesci said, you mean you were serious about that? And yeah, the judge was dead serious about that. So I'm dead serious, folks, and I'm gonna get to the bottom of this mess. It's my money.
We're not being vindictive. The reason we're getting to the bottom of it is because those are our dollars.
Yeah.
If they were wasted in the past, we want to find out why they were wasted in the past, why the internal control system was deficient, so that it doesn't happen again in the future.
That's everybody's money, including the students. I mean, a lot of the students are homeowners and got families and so forth and so on, and they're living on a real tight budget. They're paying their taxes, and then to have it, essentially flushed down the toilet at times, then it burns me up.
And 10% of that budget would be $8 million. So if we've got a 10% error, which is a huge error, or a huge problem, maybe it's only 1%. Doc, that's getting close to $1 million.
That's right.
So when you say only 1%, let's look at the money.
Right.
So it's worth somebody's effort to get in there and investigate it. There should, based on the budget, there should already be a person in there investigating it, and that would be the internal auditor. For whatever reason, and we'd like to find out that reason,
Right.
they have not had an internal auditor for years. So I'm concerned about that, but it's in an interest of improving their system that I'm concerned. Yeah.
Well, I'll just,
Are we after somebody? No, we're after the truth.
right.
Now, if the truth comes out and it says everybody's doing a wonderful job, it's like when the Boeing chairman went over to become chairman of Ford Motor Company, and he brought in all the executives, and everybody thought they were doing a great job. He said, okay, why are we losing money?
Yep.
If everybody's doing a great job, why can't we make a profit? We're going broke.
Right.
So finally, somebody broke the ice and said, hey, maybe we can improve. Well, we're looking to have improvement there. And I think, it's my opinion, that if we have to spend more money to improve the internal control system, we're going to save a multiple of that. And based on my background, I'm all in favor of putting in additional controls so that other people don't, we don't want other people, our executives or employees, to say, I'm not sure if that lawnmower is going to be used or not, and maybe we're just going to throw it out, so I'll just take it home.
Yeah.
I don't want that to happen. That corrupts the entire system from the bottom to the top.
Right.
And I'll tell you, if the top is corrupt, it flows all the way down.
Right.
And I've seen it in the valley.
This is really gonna prove that, it's like, well, most people don't like him, but cats do.
About a year and a half ago, requested all the bad debt write-offs for Del Mar College. At that time, he was presented with approximately a 5-foot stack of paper. In that 5-foot stack of paper, I was with him, we found a 3-page document totaling $185,750.64. It said bad debt write-off, third party. Well, we asked for the detail of that. In the process of obtaining the detail, and it was a Public Information Act request, I was asking for the general ledger accounts, just a handful of general ledger account detail. The response I received from the college was it would require 105 million documents and over 100 man-years to produce them at a cost of somewhere approaching $27 million for me. Well, when I received that response, which was signed by a Miss Tammy McDonald, when I received that response, I sent that to 2 different places. The first one was the Texas Attorney General, and the other was the investigative team at KRIS-TV. Well, after they interceded, both of them, the Attorney General sent a response to, or sent a letter of inquiry to Miss McDonald, and KRIS sent a news team, an investigative team, over to the college. Remarkably, things got resolved, and they were resolved for much less than the approximately $27 million. In fact, they were resolved for zero. And it did take a meeting with the college outside counsel to mediate this from the from the 27 million down to zero, and it took less than 15 minutes. Anyway, the result of that, we got our information, which was the detail of a handful of general ledger accounts. And then, after analyzing those accounts, I was able to ask for additional information to see what was posted to the subledgers in accounts receivable for this $185,000 that was written off as third-party receivables, uncollectible. And that included names that everybody recognizes, like Kingsville A&M, the Council of Government. These were big dollar amounts that were written off as uncollectible. Well, the result was this memo, because I asked for the detailed transactions in the accounts receivable subledger. Now, this is a very revealing memo. It says, in the spring of 2010, the college went through a system conversion from one accounting system to another. Well, then the next sentence says the conversion really didn't work all that well. The general ledger balances at conversion were balanced to the subsidiary ledger and then transferred to the data tail. After adding all the records, they were out of balance. The subsidiary ledger did not exist for the $185,750. That means the conversion didn't go all that well. And I have never seen a memo from the person in charge of a conversion that failed like this. Now, I have seen, in my 35 years of consulting, I have seen 2 different conversions that failed in this manner. And what I mean is that the beginning number of accounts and dollar accounts converted into a lower number of accounts with a lower dollar amount. I've seen that done twice. That is normally called, and I refer to it as a failed conversion. If you start out with 1,000 accounts and you end up with 990, something didn't convert. That's an example. Now, in this case, what Mr. Johnson's saying is, well, they missed $185,000 of detailed conversions. It just didn't exist in the new accounting system. Well, as an accountant, as a trained accountant, I would have stopped at that point and said, okay, the conversion failed. We have to redo it. Let's revert back. And that's what I've seen in the past for all except for two occasions. In those 2 occasions, they went forward with a failed conversion, and in both of those instances, within a year, the person in charge of the conversion was no longer associated with the company, and one of them had been there for over 20 years. And the other one, that was the wife of the owner, future ex-wife, by the way. So things didn't go that well in those 2 instances. And in both of those instances, the person in charge of the conversion attempted to cover up the failed conversion. They didn't make it known. The only reason in both those occasions that it became known was that cash flow deteriorated. See, once a conversion is made and the subsidiary records are no longer available, nobody can collect them. They don't know they're there to be collected. In this case, we being Delmar, $185,750.64 of third-party receivables. That means the new accounts receivable subledger did not include records totaling that amount that were related to third-party receivables. And, strangely, they were written off subsequent to this conversion, approximately, well, in excess of a year later. This memo says that in the spring of 2010, the conversion occurred. The write-off was in 2012, so that was well over a year later. And that was one write-off that we're aware of. We don't know what else happened. We just stumbled onto that in a 5-foot stack of paper. Now, we've asked for more information, and we continue to ask for more information. It's not as if the college is providing this voluntarily. In fact, it's been very arduous to get this this far in the information trail, and it is a trail. Each time we ask for the information, we discover more data that we need detail for. So it's a long process. And in this case, the roadblock was thrown up for almost $27 million. I believe they did not want me to know that the detailed subledger didn't exist after the conversion. And for good reason. That's very embarrassing. It should have never occurred. I've seen it twice. Both times, as I've said, the person in charge of the conversion was no longer with the company a year later. Now, at Delmar, when you don't collect the accounts receivable, it doesn't mean that cash is running out, because Delmar has the alternative to tax the people of Nueces County. Their tax rate goes up when the receivables collections go down. There's no alternative. They've got approximately $80 million of expenses. Those are going to get paid. Now, they're either going to get paid by the collection of receivables or the collection of taxes. There's no real alternative. Somehow it's going to be paid. If none of the receivables are collected, the expenses are still going to be paid. The taxes would have to go up. That would be at an extreme. This is a letter from me to the Attorney General regarding the 105 million documents and the approximately $27 million of cost that I was quoted from Delmar. The memo's the letter's a little difficult to read, so I'm going to put another picture up while I explain some of this. Now, what we're looking at, or what originally prompted us to look at this, was the amount of bad debt that was being written off, and we found this in the budget. It's a public document. This was a couple of years ago. We found that the budget was including in it write-offs of bad debts that was escalating as the student enrollment declined. That didn't make logical sense to either me or the doctor. So we looked into it further, and the more we looked, the less sense it made. And it resulted in us finding this memo, or obtaining this memo from Mr. Johnson, saying that the conversion basically, in my interpretation, is that the conversion of the accounts receivable system failed. And they lost some of the accounts during the conversion process. So we got this memo after writing to the Attorney General, and after KRAS sent their investigative team down there to Delmar with a camera. And the memo is very revealing. But let me just say that in my experience, 35 years of accounting consulting experience, I have undergraduate and graduate degrees in accounting. It's been my experience that a lot of people go into the accounting, bookkeeping, accounting clerical functions and spend decades there and really don't have any overview of what they're doing. They know they do a procedure the same as they did it before, or the same as someone else did it before, but they don't have an understanding as to why. And this has been my experience. I've seen people with 35 and 40 years of accounting clerical experience that had no idea what they were doing. And without a direct supervisor, they made messes. Now, I don't know what the experience level is at Delmar for either the clerks or the management over there. I do realize that the CFO doesn't appear to have any accounting background whatsoever. I'm under the impression that Mr. Johnson has an accounting degree, but I don't know that for a fact. I know that he does not have a CPA certificate. But I don't know what their background is. But if nobody's watching them, as with my clients, if nobody's watching, they continue to do things that aren't correct. And they don't have any idea that they're wrong. If they have no idea how to check their own work, and nobody's checking their work for them, then errors are created and perpetuated. So what we have here is, I believe, nobody's watching Delmar. Nobody's watching the accounting system. No third party, certainly. Okay, now they do have an audit, but that's an external audit. And they have what is called materiality. So they're saying the financial statements are materially correct. And I'm certain they are.